as Western economists and businessmen, they have an idea of like how an economy works in the West or in like a Western style economic system.
Correct.
What is driving China's economy? What's happening in there? Why has it hit this wall?
Okay. So you have seen the real estate and the stock markets take enormous tumbles. And that's related to the fact that the Chinese citizen has got very few options in terms of things that they can do to invest their monies. And so they can either buy real estate or they can maybe buy, invest in stocks in some companies. So that they've tied up their savings, and then as a result of various perceptions on where the economy is going, those things have slid down. Now, what's happened, Chris, is that the reason that China has hit the wall, those are my terms, is that if you sit back and you look at the real big picture of the development of an economy of a country over a period of time, basically you end up dividing it into two stages. And this is true with the way that our own country developed. So in the first stage, which we have seen in China, and it ran from about, I would say, 1980 to maybe somewhere in the 2005 or maybe 2010 period, is a period of hard infrastructure development. We saw that in our own country starting about in the 19th century after the Civil War with the Transcontinental Railroad, and then it went into the 19th century with building of things like the Golden Gate Bridge, the Hoover Dam, the interstate highway system, things like that. And in China, we've seen the development of all kinds of hard infrastructure assets. And so this is the stage one. This is the real easy part of the development of an economy. Now, where the wall is in going from a stage one to a stage two, this is where you get into the development of the human resources and human capital of a country. And that development is what leads to more and more innovation and more sophisticated products, projects, software, more sophisticated. So what's happened is that China is on the outer or beyond the outer edge of this stage one. They've got this. I mean, you look at a map of China and you see this massive network of rail systems all over the country. And one of the things they did with the Belt and Road exercise, just a piece of it, was so they could continue building and provide jobs outside of the country. That was part of the plan, a piece of it, of the whole Belt and Road initiative. So in moving into this second stage, this is way more complicated and takes way more time. And it means that China is going to have to really change its way of thinking. And this whole notion of party authoritarian Leninist thinking is blocking China moving into this stage two. So it's kind of like that old story of the Vermont farmer who's standing on the side of the road, and the tourist comes up and asks him for directions to the nearest 7-Eleven. And the farmer tells the tourist, "You can't get there from here." And that's precisely where China is, because its Leninist, rigid thinking is, unless you believe that Xi Jinping is going to initiate some massive reform, they can't get into stage two because they can't get that development of freedom and human resources that's going to allow them to move beyond where they are. So the reality is, when you look at China's economy, it's divided into various pieces that we can talk about later. It's very, very fragmented. But essentially, the big picture is China cannot move into stage two because it's communist way of thinking, its party principles, are blocking it. That's why my view is, as we look forward into the future, China's economy has basically hit its level of productivity. We will see maybe some modest changes over time, but essentially it's leveled out. And it's going to be a little bit like Japan for the foreseeable future.
Can they borrow stage two from the West?
Borrow?
What I mean is steal. Like what I'm thinking of is if you talk about things like this authoritarian system has a hard time of, having technological innovation, could you just lure like Microsoft or Nvidia or something and be like, come here and develop your chips and computer software and stuff in China domestically, and then they can, essentially take that intellectual property?
Well, Shelley, that's a really dynamite question. And if you look historically, go back to some date like 2010, 2005, something like that, you will see the party attempting to do precisely what you've described. And so they'll be looking at ways that they can capture the innovation, capture the intellectual property. In fact, there's a saying in China translated in English to justify this, and it goes basically it's goes something like this. It's we are not stealing, we are simply standing on the shoulders of giants. And that was their justification for not having the ability to innovate. Now, we have seen in the ethnic Chinese who are allowed freedoms in Taiwan, as an example, they don't have a problem going into stage two. And this is one of the real problems that Xi Jinping has with Taiwan, is that month by month, year by year, Taiwan is pulling away from China in terms of its success of its economic model. So today, as we look at the two countries, mainland China looks more and more like East Berlin because of its authoritarian control. And Taiwan looks more and more like West Berlin. And this is a problem for the party, its leadership, and its survival. And this is one of the big incentives for pushing to get control of Taiwan, because there are plenty of people in China saying, why can't we have this freedom? Why can't we be like Taiwan?